Hey, Dave Trafford here, and this is a special drop in the On the Ledge feed. I know we've taken a break since the legislature rose for the summer on its recess, but we gathered the roundtable earlier in the week, the morning after the Toronto election for the new mayor of the city, and we sifted through the entrails of the post-election results. So here is our version of the now and next roundtable, courtesy of Bob Reid, John Wright, and Sabrina Nanji.
An original
from Story Studio Network.
Well, it is the morning after. Here we go. It's June the 27th. It's a Tuesday. And if you're trying to keep track, it's the year 2023. Welcome in. It's now and next. Dave Trafford here from Story Studio Network. And as promised, we said we would gather the round table to sift through the post-election entrails here in Toronto. Big win last night. Probably wire to wire, safe to say, but no real surprise when I think Connor McDavid won the Hart Trophy last night. So. So to get into that and other things, we welcome in Bob Reid. He is the principal at Broadway Strategy and Communications. John Wright is here. You know him from our Ontario Politics podcast, On the Ledge, and of course he is a senior VP at Maru Public Opinion. And Sabrina Nanji from Queen's Park Observer. Do you recall an election like this where in a mayoralty race where it was contested that somebody led wire to wire? I don't ever remember seeing a candidate come out of the gate way ahead. And it's not like there weren't other credible candidates running against Chow, but she just ran it from one end to the other.
Yeah, when all the dust settles, that's exactly what happened. But I was shocked, literally shocked, when the initial results started to come in, and there was Anna Bailo with a substantive lead that hung on for a while. My expectation was what the polls had told us all along, that Olivia Chow is going to run away with this, and it'll be game, set, match, and probably called by 9:07 p.m. or 8:07. But it didn't turn out that way. So that made me happy, because we always like a horse race, even if it's in the clubhouse turn. And we got a little bit of that last night. If you crunch the vote percentages, more people voted for the other candidates than did for the winner, but 'twas ever thus in our system. The same holds true at the provincial and federal levels most of the time. But no, it was a decisive win for Olivia Chow, and I think she had several things going for her, but on a sort of an issues and positioning front, she captured what was really front of mind for Toronto voters, and that is affordability overall, the housing crunch in particular. And if you think back to the beginning of this campaign, everybody was talking about crime. It was incidents on the TTC, one after another after another. There was this perfect storm of things that seemed to bode so well for Mark Saunders, and yet he turned out as an also-ran, frankly, when you look at the vote totals.
Yeah, Sabrina, I want to get back to that in a second, but I just want to kind of take to the point that Bob touched on, and that was the vote for Chow was significant. And I think she got more votes than a lot of other mayors who won for the first time in the past. Certainly more than Rob Ford, for example, and he was seen as an outsider. But we looked at the popular, or actually the vote overall, and it was close to 40% of the eligible voters. Now, you know what? In other days, we might have thought that was fairly anemic. I think most people were looking at thinking it's going to be in the low 20s here. So when she goes cap in hand to Queen's Park, she's going to be able to say at least that she's got something of a mandate, and probably there was more engagement in this election than there had been in the last two with John Tory in the race.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we all know that municipalities are creatures of the province. Olivia Chow has already promised not to use these strong mayor powers. I guess we'll see if that if that continues, and she holds to that. But I think for all the people that were expecting, Doug Ford and Chow to put on the boxing gloves and step into the ring, especially, what we had seen in the days leading up to election day, don't hold your breath. I think they're going to play nice. We kind of heard Chow mention that a little bit in her victory speech when she said, I just got off the phone with Doug Ford and Steve Clark, the housing minister. It was a gracious call, is how she put it. She said, and then she said, "Let's get it done," which was borrowing the PC's campaign slogan from last spring. And so I think for Ford, don't forget, in the days leading up to the election, he basically said Chow would be an unmitigated disaster. He was full on endorsing Mark Saunders, which we know that really didn't give him a bump in the same way that John Tory's endorsement of Anna Bilau, gave her a bit of a boost. Obviously, it wasn't enough for either of them. And so I think it of course signifies change. I mean, of course, this had to be a change election. We were kind of forced into it by John Tory stepping down. But the fact that someone like Olivia Chow, who is so opposite from them in politics and policy, just really signifies, where Toronto stands right now. And there are a lot of issues. I was kind of the camp that I really thought at the beginning of this that Mark Saunders might take it because of the state of the city and public safety in particular. But this is a real message, of course, and so Chow can do that. I do wonder if she's going to stick to her promise not to use these strong mayor powers, because I think they could very much come in handy for any type of mayor. But don't expect these two to be fighting. I mean, Ford especially has showed that he can play nice with someone who's not on his side politically, when it comes to, as they like to say, getting things done. He's played nice with Trudeau when he needs funding from the feds, and he's butt heads with Trudeau when it's sort of advantageous for him politically. So I think we can see these two playing nice. Obviously, they're going to spar on certain issues. I'm waiting to see what happens if Chow can even really do anything with Ontario Place and the Science Centre move, because she's sort of come out swinging against that one, the Ford government's plans for the waterfront. So I think, there are going to be some sparks. I have asked the Premier's office, when their first meeting is going to be. It's still too early for that. They don't say much on that front yet. But I don't think it's going to be the fireworks that it was during the campaign itself.
John, was there a ballot question here? Because as we're all talking, we're kind of pointing to certain things that resonated. I mean, to the point where, everybody, I think Bob's right. Everybody was thinking that the violence and the deterioration of the city was sort of front and center and top of mind with so much commentary, and was popular with the likes of Saunders and Anthony Furey. But clearly, Chow talked very little about that. Drove the lane around housing and affordability to some degree, similar to Bilau. But I didn't really ever hear that this was the definitive question that we were solving with this election.
I don't want to place this panel in its own little box, but we aren't the ones that are the demographic that would have elected Olivia Chow. It's clear when you look at the CTV master board last night, or CP24's board, or whoever had it out last night, where they had a blue and a kind of yellow pockmarked screen at the beginning, and then all of a sudden it changed. You can see that it's clear. I mean, there was one side which was for the haves and the other side for the have-nots. I mean, I watched, two of the debates, and it was the same message all the time. All the time. It was all about affordable housing. It was about social services. It was about making sure that the voices were heard. It was all of that sort of stuff from Chow. On the other side, we talked tactically as opposed to specifically. In the back of our minds, it was always like, stop her because we're going to have a tax increase. And then the other part of it was just stop her. At the end of the day, it was coalesce around and stop Chow. Whereas she actually had a machinery and she had an agenda. And that agenda, you look in that room last night when she came on stage. I mean, that's not the group of people that were in the other places. So I think there's been a really significant sea change here. I think there's been, and that's where, you hear her talking about investing in social services, and it's in all that sort of stuff. So when she was asked, remember in CP24, when she was asked point blank by all of the candidates and by the host, John Moore, specifically about, are you going to raise taxes? She completely evaded the answer, but went back to her line. I mean, that's what politicians do. But it was all about, we're going to give voice to those who haven't had it. So that's, in a way, an NDP organized kind of pitch at this thing. But it also represents an interesting circumstance for how you're going to manage council going forward. And I think, the only thing I heard last week from a couple of insiders were that she may be a nice person and she may have a particular way of doing things and she's cordial on the phone and things like that. But there's a lot of people who are going to be on her staff and the new people coming in who have got a lot of scores to settle. They're not going to be a fun group. And you hear that oftentimes between, the Tories and the Liberals when somebody takes power at Queen's Park or something like that. It'll be interesting to see because they go back to a council that exists. I mean, everybody's there in their seats. It's not like they're bringing in new staff and they're getting to know each other and things. No. These are people who were either for ya or agin ya. And she's won. And it's going to be I think it'll be interesting. We won't really hear or see much until the fall, but it'll be interesting to see how there is that. I don't think there's any kumbaya here. I just don't think so.
Well, Bob, I mean, I think when we look at that in terms of the endorsements that she got, and I know we can talk about whether the endorsements matter or not, but I think to John's point, there was, almost a third of council standing behind her, bylaw that is, to say we want her to be the mayor. Expressly, not Chow. This is an issue. So, yes, I know that there are certain folks who are going to be in, Chow's good graces and will support the new mayor. But she's going to have a challenge coalescing this group to actually get anything done. Never mind the drama that may or may not unfold at Queen's Park. I'm not quite as optimistic around this as Sabrina is. I think the gloves are going to come off around November because that'll be election time, budget time in terms of process and everything else. But I think her first challenge is actually how does she deal with this council, which is already, remember, passed John Tory's budget. They were for the most part, in lockstep with John Tory's agenda. So for her to pursue anything other than that or get too far out of the lines on that is going to be a hard job for her.
It's a challenge for any new mayor to build that coalition and have enough support to advance your agenda, because despite the strong mayor provisions, unless they're enacted, and she says she won't go there, I think that, that's the case until maybe something is deemed to be needed to be changed in that regard.
Exactly, yeah.
So I wouldn't bet the farm that we'll never see that invoked. But of course, she's going to try and build alliances and be able to advance her agenda forward. She does have the left side core of City Hall in her court. To your point, there were many and a majority of council lining up behind Anna Bylaw. But the other thing, let's remember at City Hall, where there are no official party divides, it's a lot easier to be more self-serving for an individual councillor to suddenly be willing to be more cooperative with the new mayor, because that can help where they sit in the grand scheme of things and help them with their longer term career aspirations. So I saw at least one sort of 11th hour conversion from one of the newly elected, the first-time councillors, started posting last night a picture with Olivia Chow. And, I wasn't originally strongly supportive of a candidate in this mayor's race, but boy, oh boy, I'm with Chow now. I think she is talking about everything that Toronto needs. So I think you'll see some slush in the less dug-in councillors that way, who are going to look at what does she want to accomplish, what can I live with, and what helps me down the road if maybe I can be a member of an important committee around here and use that to keep on the radar of people, because as our friend John Wright pointed out quite recently when I was chatting with him, she's got a short runway. She's becoming mayor midterm, and she's going to face the next general municipal election way faster than any of her predecessors. So there's not a lot of time here to get things done. So if she's smart, she will pick judiciously as to what does she want to invest her political capital on, so that when she has to go to the polls again, it's not a matter of, well, she didn't get this, she didn't get that, she didn't get this other thing. More, it's like, here are the things that I was able to accomplish in a short time. Give me a new mandate and we can really get things done.
Well, I think, Sabrina, to that point, I mean, I think John's right in as much as we're going to say we're not going to see anything substantive until the fall. But the first thing that she will do is select her executive committee. And then there will be the blessings in terms of who leads, who chairs a number of the key committees. And first and foremost, we're going to have to look at TTC and who's going to take care of housing. I wouldn't be shocked if John Burnside stayed as the head of the TTC commission. But at the same time, I cannot see any path where Brad Bradford keeps his job in housing under Chow. If you look at the results in his ward alone, he got killed in his own ward last night.
Yeah.
And,
Sorry, it's my ward.
Right. He should have won that ward. There's no question. He just got trounced. So I on sort of an aside, I just wonder what that says about his own political future as a city councillor. But I don't see him in the housing portfolio. So who do you? I mean, I think those two key players are going to say a lot about, to Bob's point, what we're going to see in the short term and what we have to achieve quickly.
Yeah, I was watching CP24 last night, and one of the reporters asked Brad Bradford, like, "Are you going to run for mayor again in 2026?" And I had to laugh at that question because I was like, I don't know if he even wants to stick around council. I mean, clearly the message was not a good one that he was getting from people. He finished behind Mitzi Hunter, another person I was like, oh, ouch. Like when I saw these numbers, Mitzi came up with like 2.9, roughly like 2.9% of the vote. She finished sixth behind Anthony Fury and Josh Matlow. She gave up her seat at Queen's Park to do it. And, Scarborough didn't exactly vote for her either, her home turf. And so I think for these folks, they might be looking at their political prospects, but again, it was a very crowded field. So I will, give them that. It was a very crowded field. I think there's a lot of questions as to whether, Bradford or Fury, say, dropped out, if that would have given Anna Bila the bump she needed to, or even Saunders to overtake Chow. But there were over 100 people on this. I think even the dog Molly got like 600 votes or something like that.
Hey, Molly.
So there's a lot to dig into on like the state of democracy in this city, I think. But yeah, I think, Brad Bradford is probably thinking about what's next. I think we're all wondering to see, what Chow does with council. I'm curious if Josh Matlow, if he'll get, one of these positions too. So there's a lot, and it's only 3 years that Chow has here. And I'm also curious as to, I guess since Bradford was asked about 2026, what 3 years of Chow is going to mean if, for Ontario politics too. I mean, after David Miller, there was Rob Ford, then it was sort of like the steady as she goes, supposedly milquetoast John Tory, who ended up having this very exciting, dramatic scandal on his way out. And so I do think, we should give Chow a chance at this. But for Brad Bradford, I think he's probably like licking his wounds right now too, as being, getting the message that maybe a lot of people don't like him. I'm actually staying in Beaches, East York, now, and a lot of people I've just been talking to, at coffee shops or neighbors, things like that, they really don't like him. And it kind of makes you wonder, how did he get elected in the first place? But for a lot of people, I think, and even Mitzi, I wonder, what's next for her. Does she really even want to stick around in politics? There was some speculation around Queen's Park that what with Gary Crawford, the Scarborough Southwest councillor, being the PC candidate for the Scarborough Guildwood by-election, if he wins that, would Mitzi potentially run for his council seat? I've heard Anthony Fury might be looking at that too. I have a feeling Mitzi's going to just stay out of politics and maybe head to the private sector. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, we're all wondering like what happens now for you, and even Mark Saunders. I think I'm curious to see if he gets a political appointment, because he's also, he's had that before from Doug Ford, his political and personal friend, and he's worked on worked on Ontario Place, the COVID vaccine rollout. So I think it'll probably be maybe a nicer landing for him at the provincial level, but we know that tends to come with a lot of criticism when Doug Ford appoints somebody close to him. So I guess it remains to be seen, but they're down, but maybe not completely out yet.
Just on a short note, I think this council is going to be so factionalized. I mean, you have two power groups that have emerged here, and I would think the support base, if you weren't in it for in any way, this moment where you could see cooperation with Olivia Chow, it ain't gonna happen. If anything, there's gonna be sand in the gears. I mean, you've got, as Dave, as you rightly point out, we don't have the same length of time. So let's just kind of play this out in our mind. I mean, you and I know that politicians say, I'm not going to raise taxes and I'm not going to do this. And then what happens about 2 months in, they open the bag and it's like, oh, you wouldn't believe what I just found in there. And it's like, oh my God, of course we're going to have to use strong mayor power. I said I didn't, but look what these people did, and now, okay, so we're into September, November time frame. You're going to bring in a new budget, like everything is kind of going to get around that, which means then that you've got the beginning of 2024 and you're into campaigning within about 16 months. And I'll be very interested to see how many people sort of like fighter jets sort of swinging behind the candidate right now who's established that liberal conservative side, the have group. And the reason I laugh at, I didn't mean to cut up Josh Matlow, who's my local guy, but much to your point, Sabrina, I live in a ward where he continually wins, but I don't really know anybody who likes him. My daughter is, just graduated university last night and turned to me and said, Dad, do you think I should run? And I said, absolutely. But I think you're going to see a sea change in the next election campaign where we're going to have these two factions. It's a very interesting dynamic where you've got the politics, barefaced right in front of you. You've got the haves and the have-nots. You've got old guard moderate versus new guard social activists. Hang on to your hats, folks. I think this is going to be far more interesting than we even thought.
So how long is the honeymoon period here for Chow, Bob? Because, I mean, say what you will. I'm not convinced, and I have said this already, I'm not convinced that Olivia Chow is what Toronto needs right now as the mayor. She's the mayor. Okay, we're going to have to all live with that. We're going to have to move this thing forward. To Sabrina's point, we need to give her room to be successful. We need to, give her that shot at that. Everybody is agreeing the runway's short. So how long is that honeymoon period? I heard her on the radio this morning talking to John Moore, and God love him, John's been saying, how much are you going to raise taxes? Because we know that that's coming. John's Wright's point is, there's the reckoning is coming. We have to really deal with that in bold letters. She keeps saying, well, you'll find out in March of 2024. That's just horseshit, because she's going to have to come out in November and say, we're starting consultations on the budget. And we know full well that the first day back in January, that's when they start to debate the budget. It's not in March. So this whole idea that we can kind of, rope-a-dope this for the next almost a year, not a chance. I just don't think people are going to have patience for that. We're going to want to see things done now.
Nothing substantive is going to happen this summer. Obviously, it usually doesn't, and now you've got a grace period where you've got to give the new administration time to get up and running, get staff in position, consider committee appointments, all of that sort of infrastructure of putting a new mayor in place. So we won't see anything substantive over the summer, but come the fall, get on the other side of Labor Day, the linchpin moment is going to be her meeting with Doug Ford. Because she can't do anything substantive. She can't advance any considerable piece of her agenda without that New Deal from Queen's Park that every candidate, frankly, spoke about and identified as a need. So that is going to be the tipping point, whether it turns into pitched battles between City Hall and Queen's Park or within City Council, if she can't get any traction there. Now, I certainly don't expect Doug Ford is going to say, oh, you've got a big wish list? Well, here, let's open the coffers and give you what you need. He's going to be a tough customer to deal with because he's not going to give her carte blanche. He's going to challenge her agenda before he's giving any Ontario taxpayer money to Toronto, on the one hand. But on the other, Doug Ford needs Toronto. Doug Ford he is a Toronto premier, and he understands as well that the ongoing problems in Toronto that have been highlighted through this campaign are not going to go away anywhere fast, and he's going to be up for re-election. And if people feel that the malaise in the city is continuing, they're not necessarily going to blame Olivia Chow for that, especially if Olivia Chow can turn around and say, I made an honest appeal to Queen's Park to give the city what it needs, and they've either said no or they're not doing nearly enough. So he's got, whether he wants to admit it or not, he's got a fine line to walk here as well between being a defender of the taxpayer's purse, but also recognizing that he's got to give something to Toronto. He doesn't want to give it to Olivia Chow. He would have been a lot happier giving it to Anna Bailão, but it is where it is. So back to my point, I think the real tell going forward is going to be what happens early post-summer when those discussions get underway in earnest.
So reading your post this morning on the Queen's Park Observer, Sabrina, and and you cited all of the niceties and the congratulations and all that stuff that they got from officialdom. But I thought it was interesting when I read the quote that you published from Bonnie Crombie, talking about how important it was for us to have, common ground and, the idea that we're neighboring municipalities and the interests that we share and so on. Crombie is going to play a role in the success of Olivia Chow, I think, because to some degree, she's going to be able to carry water that Chow can't if she becomes the leader of the Liberal Party, even in that campaign leading up to the vote. I think there's an interesting twist in there in terms of what the politics of Toronto looks like in the fall against the backdrop of the Liberal leadership campaign with Crombie front and center.
Yeah, I mean, politically, this is so interesting. Obviously, we've already talked about how Doug Ford's endorsement of Mark Saunders really didn't help him, but provincially anyway, and I guess even federally, like Toronto doesn't really elect conservatives, at least, partisan wise. Most of the seats provincially in Toronto are either NDP or Liberal. Ford maybe has like the outskirts of Etobicoke, Scarborough now too. And so I think for someone like Bonnie and the Liberals, this is very interesting because obviously she would want to pick up a lot of those votes, when it came down to a general election if she was leader. And so I think it's going to be interesting, especially on the housing front, to see how these two sort of go about it. I mean, Bonnie Crombie did get strong mayor powers. She's now getting independence. But she's also been called NIMBY queen by a lot of her critics. And so I think that's one thing I'm going to be looking out for too. But, Bonnie Crombie, as far as I could tell, correct me if I'm wrong on this because it was late at night and I was half watching the TV and Twitter and all that. But I'm pretty sure Bonnie was the first one that came out of all the Liberal leadership contenders to say something about Olivia Chow. And so this just kind of shows that, she's very seriously making this play for Liberal leader. And to have someone like Chow on your side in a general election, I think, could really help you. And as we've said, Chow did get a pretty big mandate, although, turnout, as it always is, wasn't exactly the greatest. But still, I think to watch these two sort of align, perhaps, it's still very early, and maybe against Doug Ford will be very interesting in the GTA and the 905 in particular, because obviously that there's a lot of votes up for grabs in the 905. Doug Ford is making a big play for the 905 too. They do have more seats there. They have all the Brampton seats right now and a bunch of Mississauga seats. So I think politically this is going to be very interesting, but also, we now have in Toronto, an NDP leaning mayor, not officially NDP, provincially we have the Conservatives, and then federally we have the Liberals. So I think we're kind of going to see everyone sort of like come around the center rather than be more polarizing. I think, it's raising questions for me anyway, as to like what does your partisan stripe really mean these days in terms of policy. So I think as long as these people can, I really am loath to use this again, get it done when it comes to policy. They've got a few years. I think voters really are starting to care less, about your political stripe. I don't know how much, party brand is really playing a part in everything. But, with that said, of course, the Liberal brand is still going strong in Ontario.
So let me ask you before we go, because all of this is, again, against the backdrop of the suggestion that we're going to see a cabinet shuffle at Queen's Park. What are you hearing?
So initially I was hearing June, right? And we've got a couple of days left. So it remains to be seen. I am hearing that it's still going to happen this summer. I think that initially the plan was June, but then a lot of folks, myself included, I know Brian Lilly at The Sun, Martin Redcone at the Star, have kind of been harping a little bit on Caroline Mulroney because we've heard her name as the one on the chopping block. I think they might be not wanting to do that right now because it might sort of hurt Mulroney, make it look like, she's to blame for what's happening in transit, crosstown delays, that sort of thing. So I don't think that's going to happen. The latest buzz is that this could potentially happen after the by-elections. We've got 3 by-elections coming up: Kanata Carleton, Scarborough, and Kitchener, because potentially some of those folks might get boosted to the front bench. I'm not ruling it out yet, but I wouldn't hold my breath for it to happen anytime soon. But we are hearing it's still going to happen sometime this summer. And, Doug Ford was asked a couple of days ago. He didn't say no, but of course he's happy with his all-star team. So it's happening, but it's a matter of when. And as we know, the people who tend to know about this stuff don't really talk about it, but it's certainly, the topic du jour at Queen's Park, and everyone is having so much fun, including myself, speculating about who's going where.
So the more likely that we'll find out whether or not Austin Matthews signs an extension with the Leafs before we get any cabinet shuffle at Queen's Park. So we'll watch all of that with fun as we move into the summer months. Bob, Reid, John Wright, Sabrina, and Nanji, thanks for joining us. It's always great to have your insights on this, and we'll watch it all with interest. Good to talk to you. Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.